Welcome to Thoughts on Ministry podcast with Ray Eppard, a podcast focused on helping you be more effective as you serve God. Now, here's your host, Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you joined us again. I'm Ray Eppard. This is my Thoughts on Ministry, and we've been talking about leadership and change. And most recently, we've been talking about leadership and cultural change, changing the culture in an organization. And with that, today I want to hit and kind of introduce the concept of the three dimensions of leadership, the three dimensions of leadership. Because with this, one of them is that cultural change. The cultural change has to do with behaviors, how people act, how they conduct themselves. It's really not talking about how they work or what practices they use. That actually gets into a second piece of the second dimension of leadership, and that is organizational change as far as practices. What are the practices? How do they function? How do they operate? The other is more behaviors and attitudes. And the inward mindset versus the outward mindset that we've been talking about really deals with the behavioral and the attitudes and so forth that are in there. And we have to create a cultural change in those aspects, the behavioral, the mindset, how they're looking at things, how they're seeing things. Then there is the organizational change, which is the practices. What are we focusing on? Where are we putting our energy? Where are we putting our efforts? What are we doing? Those are things that also we have to lead. That's another dynamic of leadership or another dimension of leadership. And then the thing I want to kind of begin to introduce into what we're talking about here is the personal change. Personal change. The three dimensions of leadership are cultural change, organizational change, and personal change. We will not be able to lead organizational or cultural change unless there is personal change. The foundation of the other two types of change is the personal change. One of the laws of change, if you would, is if you want other people to change, they have to see change in you. That's just the reality. If we're not changing, if we're not advancing, if we're not moving forward, if we're not adapting and making adjustments, then that provides no incentive, it provides no buy-in for anyone else to make the organizational or cultural changes. It just won't work. We have to start with personal change. What do we need to change? And so in those aspects, what are we wanting them to change? Are we wanting them to change culturally in how they're processing? We want them to move from an inward mindset to an outward mindset. So if that's the case, then we have to do that. We have to maintain an outward mindset even when they don't change, and have an inward mindset. They maintain that inward mindset for a while. But once the outward mindset is there, I am firmly convinced that most people, not all people, but most people will move along with that outward mindset. Then secondly, if we're wanting to have organizational change, we're wanting to change the practices, the focus, where energy and resources are being put. We're wanting to address certain goals of the organization, so forth and so on. Then we need to have personal change in our practices, in what we implement, in how we function. Where if we don't change, but we're expecting everybody else to change, then again, that doesn't supply any incentive. And it actually goes back to a verse that Jesus gave us in Luke 6:38. Give, and it will be given unto you. If you will give an outward mindset, you will tend to receive an outward mindset. If you sow, in a manner of speaking, adjustment and change, then you will receive adjustment and change. But if you sow staying the same, then guess what you're going to reap? You're going to reap staying the same. You're going to reap nothing changing. We have to look at the three dimensions of leadership and recognize that they are all integrated together. But the foundation, and if you would, the lifeblood of them, is personal change. Personal change of the leader. Well, I'm Ray Eppert, and that's my thoughts on ministry.
You've been listening to Thoughts on Ministry with Ray Eppert. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.